During the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the modern labor movement gained momentum as a response to the harsh realities of industrial capitalism. One of the most radical approaches to labor organizing was the doctrine of industrial unionism, particularly in the form of syndicalism. Syndicalism developed as a method by which workers in a capitalist society could gain control not only over the workplace but over the economy itself. The underlying belief was that economic power could not be separated from political power, and that ownership of the means of production must be seized directly by the workers through collective and revolutionary action. This philosophy offered an alternative to parliamentary socialism, prioritizing direct economic action over legislative reform. Syndicalism was rooted in a deep dissatisfaction with the capitalist wage system. To its adherents, the wage system was not merely an unfair economic arrangement but a form of bondage that kept the worker in a state of dependency and servitude. This idea came to be known as wage slavery. The goal of syndicalism was to abolish the wage system entirely, replacing it with a decentralized network of worker-managed cooperatives. The workers would organize themselves into industrial unions that operated independently of state authority or traditional capitalist ownership. These unions would eventually federate into a larger confederation capable of managing production, distribution, and social life without reliance on capitalists or politicians. Anarcho-syndicalist theory, a subset of syndicalism, took these principles even further by rejecting both the state and all forms of hierarchical authority. According to this ideology, the state was merely an extension of capitalist control and could never serve the interests of the working class. Anarcho-syndicalists therefore placed their faith in the labor movement itself, believing that true liberation could only come through direct action, solidarity, and the self-organization of the working class. This theory emphasized the general strike as a revolutionary tool, not only to extract concessions from employers but to initiate a full-scale social transformation. The syndicalist approach was especially attractive to workers who had become disillusioned with the slow progress of parliamentary socialism. In many countries, political parties that claimed to represent labor interests had become increasingly entangled in electoral politics and state bureaucracy. For radical workers, these parties appeared more interested in gaining votes than in challenging the foundations of capitalist power. Industrial unionism provided a more confrontational and autonomous strategy, one that did not rely on politicians or legislative reforms but on the collective power of workers themselves. While syndicalism found strong support in countries such as France, Italy, and Spain, its influence was also felt in Britain, where the labor movement was undergoing a transformation of its own. In Britain, the growing industrial working class sought not only to improve working conditions but also to establish a permanent political presence. This effort culminated in the formation of the Labour Party, a political organization that aimed to represent the interests of labourers within the structure of parliamentary democracy. The emergence of the Labour Party marked a shift from economic struggle to political representation, though the party itself was shaped by a variety of ideological currents, including syndicalism, Marxism, and ethical socialism. One of the earliest and most influential socialist organizations in Britain was the Social Democratic Federation. Founded in the early 1880s by a man named Henry Myers Hindman, the Federation became the first organized socialist political party in Britain. Its foundation marked a significant development in the history of British socialism. The Social Democratic Federation attracted many prominent intellectuals and activists to its cause, including William Morris, George Lansbury, James Connolly, and Eleanor Marx, the daughter of the famous philosopher. However, the Federation also faced significant challenges and internal disagreements, particularly around the leadership style of Hindman and the question of how best to achieve socialist aims. Hindman had initially gained attention for popularizing the ideas of Karl Marx in Britain, but he was also a controversial figure. Although he claimed to follow Marxist principles, his nationalist rhetoric and authoritarian tendencies alienated many potential allies. Friedrich Engels, the close collaborator of Karl Marx, refused to support Hindman's political efforts, criticizing him for distorting Marxist theory and lacking a clear revolutionary vision. Despite these criticisms, the Federation managed to build a small but dedicated base of support, particularly among those who had been active in earlier democratic movements such as the Manhood Suffrage League. The Social Democratic Federation was not the sole architect of the Labour Party, but it played a foundational role. By the turn of the 20th century, several groups advocating for labor representation came together to form a unified political body. In the month of February during the year 1900, representatives from the Social Democratic Federation joined forces with the Independent Labour Party, the Fabian Society, and leading figures from the trade union movement to establish the Labour Representation Committee. This committee was tasked with selecting and supporting parliamentary candidates who would advocate for the interests of the working class. The Labour Representation Committee was the direct precursor to the modern Labour Party. Although the Social Democratic Federation contributed to the formation of this committee, it remained a separate organization for several years. It continued to operate independently and maintained a focus on Marxist analysis and class struggle. Internal divisions soon emerged, as factions within the Federation disagreed over the appropriate balance between electoral politics and revolutionary activism. Over time, the Federation experienced defections from both its left and right wings, with some members joining the Labour Party and others leaving for more radical formations. Eventually, in the early part of the second decade of the 20th century, the Federation merged with other like-minded groups to form the British Socialist Party. The British Socialist Party sought to unify the various strands of revolutionary socialism under a single organisational banner. It inherited many of the tensions that had plagued its predecessor, including debates over the role of the state, the value of parliamentary participation, and the nature of class struggle. Nevertheless, the party served as an important incubator for left-wing thought and activism during a period of intense social and political change. It also laid the groundwork for the eventual formation of the Communist Party of Great Britain, which emerged in the aftermath of the Russian Revolution. Throughout this period, the broader labour movement in Britain continued to evolve. Trade unions gained strength and legitimacy, winning important concessions from employers and the state. The Labour Party gradually grew in influence, securing parliamentary representation and shaping national policy. Despite its reformist orientation, the Labour Party remained influenced by the radical traditions from which it had emerged. Figures such as George Lansbury and James Connolly continued to advocate for a more transformative vision of socialism, one that went beyond legislative reform and aimed at a fundamental reordering of society. The tension between reform and revolution remained a defining feature of the British Labour movement. While the Labour Party pursued incremental change through the parliamentary system, other currents within the movement continued to push for more radical solutions. Syndicalists and anarchists, though never dominant in Britain, maintained a presence and helped to keep alive the dream of a society organised by workers, for workers, without the mediation of the state or the capitalist class. Industrial unionism, particularly in its syndicalist form, continued to influence labour organising even as the political centre of gravity shifted toward electoral politics. The principles of direct action, worker solidarity, and economic democracy remained relevant in the struggles for fair wages, workplace safety, and collective bargaining. These ideas also found expression in the efforts of rank-and-file unionists who challenged bureaucratic leadership and sought to reclaim the unions as instruments of class struggle rather than negotiation. The legacy of the Social Democratic Federation and the syndicalist tradition can still be felt in contemporary discussions about the future of work, the role of the state, and the possibility of economic democracy. In an era marked by increasing inequality, job precarity, and corporate consolidation, the ideas of industrial unionism offer a radical alternative to the dominant neoliberal model. They remind us that the workplace is not just a site of production but also a potential space for liberation and self-governance.